Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm gonna do my September wrap up. This month I read/finished a total of 10 books, which I got really confused by because for some reason I thought I had only read 6 at some point, and I was like, okay, I need to read 2 more because I want to reach 8. And then I hadn't realized I had already read 8 at that point, and I just basically read 10 books in total. So yeah, that's probably really good for my Goodreads challenge, because my main problem this year has been to get out of a reading slump and get back on my challenge, which I'm failing miserably at the moment. I'm still 10 books behind, but I'm gonna make it. Let's get straight into it. The first book that I finished, which I said I wouldn't talk about because I put it on my wrap-up of last month, is Halfway to the Grave by Janine Frost. The reason I didn't want to talk about it is because it took me so fucking long to get through this book. Like, I really did not like it most of the time. I somehow really enjoyed the ending, and it actually made me think, oh, maybe I should read the next one, which is crazy because it was like, it's like getting out of a really shitty relationship, but then the guy does like one really nice thing and you're like, oh, you weren't so bad, let's get back together. And it's like, nah, the relationship was shit, remember that. And this is what I need to remember about the book. The whole book was crap. I'm only very briefly mentioning it because I do think it counts as to my September books. If you want to know more about this book, it's a paranormal romance with a vampire and a girl who's half vampire, half human, and hates vampires. I talk way more about it in a reading vlog that I made for this series, where I'm reading the top 10 best paranormal romance series according to Goodreads, part 1. So I'll link that down below and probably up there or something, and you can have a look if you're interested in knowing more about this book. Next, I read 3 historical romance books for this little series that I've got going on now, which is I read 3 of this genre or that genre, etc. So the first one that I did was I read 3 historical romances, and the books that I picked for this were The Wallflower Wager, A Rogue by Any Other Name, and This Earl of Mine. I overall really enjoyed each of this book. I think on average I gave them 3.5 stars. If you want to know more, you can obviously check the whole video out where I detail my thoughts about these books, and I just basically vlog while I'm reading them. So you can check that out if you're interested in knowing more. But basically, The Wallflower Wager tells the story of a spinster, because she's a 26-year-old woman who is a lady, and she's passionate about helping animals that have been, you know, hurt or handicapped, etc. She's got so many, she collects them, and it kind of probably is the reason why she's a spinster, as well as the fact that she doesn't like to go out in society anymore because she was traumatized by it when she was a young girl. Then this new neighbor guy arrives, Gabriel Duke, and he is a very handsome, very rich man who doesn't have a title but just made his own money on his own, and him and her pretty much bang heads at first, but then end up banging. So that's the summary of it. Then A Rogue by Any Other Name was about these 2 childhood friends that have grown up. One of them lost everything in a gambling game against this friend of the family guy who was meant to take care of him, but pretty much really just wanted to steal his estate and his money and everything. So he's hell-bent on revenge, and he meets again this girl Penelope, who is pretty much his childhood best friend, and her dad won the estate of the guy back in another game, a game of cards, and he put it on her dowry so she would get married easily and fast. So the guy comes back and pretty much decides to fake ruin her, so she has no other choice but to marry him. They get married, it's all happening at the very beginning, and then they slowly fall in love, and she kind of like helps him become this better man instead of this bitter man. And yeah, like that's it, that's the story. And then the last one in this little series was This Earl of Mine, which was a really fun, action-packed one where the main character is a shipping heiress, and she knows how to run a business because she inherited her dad's shipping business, and she's the richest freaking woman in town. And she keeps getting harassed by one of her cousins who wants basically her money. All of the guys who have proposed to her really just want her money, and she has put this clause on contract for any marriage that she might actually get into that says the future husband that she's gonna get won't be able to touch her money. So a lot of them have given up and haven't decided to pursue it, so she's very clear on the fact that they just want her for her cash. She ends up deciding that her only resort is to marry a convict that's gonna get hanged, because then she can be a widow and widows can have all the fun apparently. But it turns out that the guy she marries at the prison ends up being someone who was undercover on a mission, and he's actually part of the ton. He's not a lord, but he's like the little brother of a lord, and so he's part of that society and everything, and they decide to fake fall in love so they can get married again, so that everyone knows about it and she doesn't have to hide it anymore. But slowly they actually fall in love with each other. The next book I read was The Babysitters Coven by Kate Williams. It was quite fun, but a little bit average, unfortunately. It's a YA contemporary fantasy novel, so basically there's aspects of fantasy, but it happens in like our world, in like town and stuff. I think I gave it 3 stars. It was kind of average. The main character just really didn't do it for me. She was kind of boring. They kept talking, her and her best friend, about like what clothes they were gonna wear for school every single fucking day, and there's so much of that content. I was just like, really? Seriously? It's so much. It also really felt like it was kind of a huge rip-off of Buffy, but way too obvious. They actually talk about Buffy references in there, but it just felt like you're clearly trying to rip it off. It's basically the story of this girl who's part of a babysitters club where her and her best friend just take babysitting calls and just go and babysit. That's it. But there's a new girl in town who's just arrived, and she's really interested in participating in this babysitting club, and Esme, the main character, is really confused by that because she's like, it's kind of lame, why would you want to be part of it? But then it turns out that it's because both of them have inherited their mom's powers, and they're part of this order called the Babysitters that are meant to help with some sort of monsters that come out of what I want to call the Hellmouth. It's not, but it's literally that, because it is a rip-off of Buffy. The next book I read was Catherine House. So this was for a book club, which is Books and Lala's Literally Dead book club. I really enjoyed this one, but it kind of was a little bit too weird as well. It kind of suffers from this huge problem for books like this, which is often they get mislabeled, and a lot of people are like, oh, it's a thriller, it's a mystery, but it's not. It's just a weird ass book. It's got elements of a mystery, someone does die, but it's not really a thriller, and it's mostly just weird. It's got Dark Academia vibes, and it's basically about this girl who goes to this really fancy school called Catherine House, and she's meant to stay there for 3 years. When students go there, they can't have any contact with the outside world for 3 whole years, and things are really weird inside. There's a little bit of weird science going on, and people and students are obsessed with the school. They love it so much. It's also a little bit cultish in a way. I did have some issues with the fact that the character is super detached and different and aloof, and a lot of people had that problem, and the fact that the book is a little bit plotless, which I think a lot of people also had an issue with that. But I did enjoy reading it. I thought the writing style was really strange but fun to read and fast-paced, so I still gave it, I think, 3 stars. The next book I read was The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So this is the other one that I read for a book club as well, which was the first pick for the late night club, and it was on Noelle's channel. I'll link it down below. For this one and for Catherine House, I did a whole reading vlog about it, so you can also check that video if you want to know more about it, but I absolutely adored this book. It was a 5-star for me, the only 5-star of the month, might I say, and it was just so good. It was so good. This is an adult contemporary novel, but set mostly in the 50s in Hollywood. So we follow Monique Grant, who's a journalist, and she gets asked by this really famous but aging and out of Hollywood actress called Evelyn Hugo, and she realizes that Evelyn wants her to write her biography, where she's finally going to talk about her famous 7 husbands, or infamous 7 husbands. The book starts with kind of the question of why Monique, because she's an unknown, she's kind of at the bottom of the chain in the paper that she writes for, or the magazine that she writes for, and she is not well known at all, so she doesn't really understand why she's the one who got chosen by Evelyn. And then the other big question of the book is, who was Evelyn's love of her life, basically? And these are the 2 questions that we get answered in the book. And it was beautifully written. There were moments that were amazing and just so great to read and so well written. And there were moments that were really sad. It actually made me cry twice. And I really felt like the characters were alive on the page. That is the beauty of the writing style of Taylor Jenkins Reid. I just thought that the characters felt completely alive to me. So 5-star for this one, loved it. Then I read And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. So this is a classic and I had never read it. I had read some Agatha Christie's, the ones with Hercule Poirot most of the time. I think that's all the ones that I've read. And I just didn't enjoy it as much because you just focus on people that you know are all gonna die and you barely see a glimpse of them. So it just didn't have enough flavor to me. Like, I know that it was a classic and it inspired so many works of fiction. I'm wondering whether it did inspire like the movies series So, because it's got a similar premise of the 10 people that are stuck on this island are all people that have committed some crime, but a crime that cannot be touched by law because maybe they pushed someone to their death but they didn't actually kill that person, and all 10 of them are accused of that by a disembodied voice when they arrive on this island. They don't know each other and then they start wondering who else is on the island. There's no one else. They search the island and they discover that there's no one else. It's just them. So who is the murderer as they go and die one by one? It was interesting to read and I'm happy that I read it. It was quite short as well, so didn't feel like too hard to pick up. But I did feel like it was just a little bit lifeless. Like, I didn't feel connected to any of the characters, so I didn't particularly care about who was gonna die, and that's the main thing that I wish I had had from this book. I would say that I cared more in the other Agatha Christie's that I have read, so it's just not my favourite of her works. Then, as I thought I hadn't read 8 books even though I had, I decided to pick up 2 very short reads to finish the month off. So the first one was this graphic novel called Blackbird, the first volume called The Great Beast by Sam Humphries. The art is gorgeous. This is a graphic novel that tells the story of Nina, a girl who years ago lived through an earthquake and realized that there were magical beings that existed, and since then she decided to research them and she's obsessed with them. They're the wizards or whatever of this world are called paragons, and she decides to research them on online forums and everything. She really wants to become one of them, but she can't find them. And then one day her sister gets kidnapped and she realizes that she knows how to find the paragons now, and she decides to go after what she's always wanted and try and become one of them. I thought it was really cool and fun, and honestly the drawings are absolutely gorgeous. Like, look at that. Just how freaking beautiful are these? It's just so amazingly well drawn. So I really enjoyed the actual artistic aspect of it and the graphics and the drawings, but I felt like the story was super rushed and very confusing. There's almost no explanations about the paragons and the magic system, and the world building is just not really developed. It's kind of more like in the background. We're meant to already know almost, and we're just thrown into it, and she uses all sorts of magical terms and words and slang that were kind of like, hey, this is that, and there's no explanations going on with them, so you just don't know what's happening, and it's very confusing and way too fast. So I just thought that if it had been maybe double the size, it would have been the right size to go through the story properly without feeling super rushed. And then finally, the last thing that I read this month is The Test by Sylvain Neuvel. This is a novella. It's super short. It's 110 pages, I think, and this is an adult dystopian sci-fi novella. I don't know if that's the correct genre, but basically it reads pretty much like an episode of Black Mirror. This is about a man called Idir, who is Iranian, and he has just arrived at the immigration office to become a British citizen and pass a British citizenship test, which is just a simple multiple choice test. However, when he starts it, some shit happens, some shit goes down. He's there to get him and his family to enter the country or stay in the country, I think. And the multiple choice test becomes something completely different, and it's got very dystopian, strange, Black Mirror-esque type of vibes. I don't want to say any more than that because it's such a short read that I feel like saying any more would be spoiling it, but it's really, really interesting and I thought it was a brilliant read. The only reason I gave it 4.5 stars and not 5 stars is because at the very end we get a little bit of an epilogue that makes perfect sense because you want to know the consequences of what's happened, and so the epilogue I think is necessary. But it gives you a bittersweet ending that you might not have had otherwise, and you might just have had a nice ending otherwise. And it just felt like I would have rather have not had it or had way more of it. Basically have way more of life after. And I just really wanted this to be just a small facet of a wider world and just be part of world building for a dystopian full-on sci-fi novel and not just novella. It feels like it would be so interesting to play off that and build it up and just make an actual book or a series. So that's why I just couldn't bring myself to give it 5 stars, but it was really, really good and I really enjoyed it. That's it. I have been filming for like 20 minutes now, which is way too long, so I'm gonna have to cut this down. Hopefully I managed to. Yeah, that was the 10 books that I read in the month of September. I hope you liked this video. Please leave a like down below, a comment if you want to ask any questions, say anything about these books, if you've read them, if you're interested in them, and then obviously please subscribe to my channel, that would be great. I will see you guys in the next one.